Welcome to Gen X Mindscape, the podcast dedicated to exploring the complexities of midlife and the pursuit of a purposeful life. I'm your host, Kyle, here to accompany you on the journey. I'm excited that you're listening to this really interesting episode. Today, we're talking about the topic of subjective aging with Dr. Allyson Brothers of Colorado State University. Subjective aging is how we perceive and feel about our own aging process. This is really important because our beliefs and our feelings about aging can really impact our mental and physical well-being. During our conversation, we start by talking about subjective aging and what can contribute to individual variations in subjective aging and our perceptions of aging. We also get into practical steps that we can use to cultivate a positive subjective aging experience and live a healthier, more fulfilling life. It was really an interesting and thought-provoking conversation for me, and it gave me a fresh perspective on healthy aging. I'm excited for you to hear it, and I'm looking forward to your response to it. And so let's introduce our guest. Today we are honored to have with us Dr. Allyson Brothers. She's an associate professor in the Department of Human Development and Family Studies at Colorado State University. Dr. Brothers is a developmental scientist whose research centers on promoting healthy aging throughout the lifespan. I've thoroughly enjoyed reading her work on subjective aging as it's really an excellent match with the mission of this podcast. And I'm just really grateful that she's taken the time to join me today. So welcome to the podcast, Allie. So happy you're with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
You are welcome. Could you start by giving our listeners some personal background and how you became interested in the topics we'll be discussing today, particularly subjective aging?
You bet. My background's in psychology. I have a bachelor's from Roanoke College and a master's from Penn State Harrisburg campus. And I've always been interested in that intersection of where psychological and physical health meet. I just think it's so fascinating. Have always been interested in understanding coping with changes and with chronic illness, and had the pleasure and opportunity to work in the neurology department at Penn State College of Medicine, working with patients with ALS and understanding how they and their families navigated a devastating diagnosis and how they did so gracefully. And in the research that we did there, we focused on caregiver support and cognitive changes and quality of life and all of these psychological and social variables that accompanied physical health. And I just knew that was the type of work that I really wanted to do. And it never occurred to me to study aging before. And when I found aging, it's kind of, this field is just, it's perfect for being able to ask those kinds of questions.
Yeah, I love that because there's such a fascinating relationship between your physical and your psychological and just your holistic well-being. So I'm really fascinated with this concept you've been writing about, which is subjective aging. So could you tell us a little bit more about this and how it might affect us in midlife?
The power of attitudes. So the field of subjective aging is actually this booming area of research right now, which I've been so fortunate to be a part of. That was a big part of my dissertation work and all the work that I did in graduate school. So I studied with Dr. Manfred Diehl, who is a leading researcher in this field. And subjective aging, the concept has been around for decades, and we've been able to advance the measurement strategy around it. And so what I'm talking about with subjective aging is simply the perceptions of aging, how people understand their own aging process and what they think about it, how it compares to what they thought it would be, how they think other people are aging and what aging is supposed to be, what they think about old people in general. There's so many of these subjective aspects of how we think about aging. And it turns out they're actually really important, and we can measure what type of impacts they have later on.
Tell us more about that. How does it relate to our well-being?
Yeah. So one way, we published a study in 2020 that found that age stereotypes predict our self-perceptions of aging, and those in turn predict our physical and mental health. And what we were able to show is that, some empirical evidence to show support of some of the theoretical thinking in this area, in that we internalize age stereotypes. So we think aging is this certain thing, and then it becomes self-relevant. At some point, we turn it towards ourselves, and it actually has measurable outcomes on how our physical health will be, even stronger than mental health, but both.
Oh, wow. So it's really, really an important topic, and I'm thankful that you've been studying it. And So what are some things that affect our subjective well-being?
Right. What are the antecedents of our self-perceptions of aging? It's such an interesting question. I think the field has a lot more work to do here, actually. There's some mixed evidence as far as does gender matter, socioeconomic status, or we've done some international work. And it seems like there is quite a bit of individual variability that we're still trying to pin down. But if you think about it, you think about what a family has experienced and how our earlier experiences might shape how we think about aging. So imagine if you were a child and you were living with someone with dementia and it wasn't going well and there was some aggression and paranoia and it was maybe scary. One was there to help you interpret what was happening, right? That can shape experiences later on. Maybe there's families who are caring for an older relative and they're able to do it at home and avoid that revolving door in the emergency room and, maximize time together as a family. And it's so different for every person and every family. And so I think those experiences really can impact what we think about aging. And then we also know aging stereotypes are just rampant in all different realms. If you work in the tech field, you're more likely to be seen as old, but before you're even 40. If you're unfortunately receiving healthcare, there's documentation that even well-intentioned healthcare providers, of which there's so many, may have more negative views about aging just simply because they're seeing the sick older adults in our population and maybe not having as much exposure and experience to the ones that are healthy and thriving. And so there's negative age stereotypes that are rampant. I mean, depends on who sends you birthday cards, right? Are they sending you the birthday cards that you can't control your body anymore and you won't remember anything? And that's what aging is. These stereotypes, it's still kind of socially acceptable to make fun of aging and older people and the remaining isms that's kind of still allowed to have humor in our society at this point.
That's exactly right. And I love that your work is advancing that. That's one of the things I like to do here is change that narrative. Like, let's think about this. It is subjective and think about the messages that we are receiving. It seems like there's an internal piece in how you respond to signs that you're aging. You may be getting more gray hairs, or you may be seeing somebody doesn't know what Pac-Man is, for example, and then also you're receiving it. There are other people that are putting that perception on you. And so are you saying that it's both, that we are working on both ends of that?
That's exactly right. So my research is focused on the former. So the construct that I've been involved in creating a measurement for and assessing in different cultures, and it's called awareness of age-related change. And it's simply that. How do we become aware that we're growing older? And we've measured it across 5 different domains. So how do you feel about aging and cognitive domain versus physical, leisure versus family, and interpersonal. And so those perceptions matter, but certainly they're influenced by the way you're treated. So the way that you may perceive it as discrimination or microaggressions, or you might not even notice it. Most people don't even notice it. And it's just messages. And I think one of the harms comes when we don't question what these messages are.
Yeah, we just accept what we're hearing, or we accept what society has told us about it. And I could see where that would really make a difference on, I would guess, your resilience in terms of aging, or your outlook on aging.
Yeah.
Hey there, listeners. I wanted to take a moment to express my deep gratitude for listening and for your support. Today, I'm asking for a quick favor that won't cost you anything, but would be very valuable to me. And that is, leave me a review. Positive reviews will help other like-minded Gen Xers find the show and join our community. These reviews are also a big encouragement to me to continue to develop the show and create helpful episodes for you. So thanks for sending a review my way, and thanks for being a part of the Gen X Mindscape community.
Yeah, we've definitely been able to link these. And so I teach a course on resilience. I'm more in a teaching focused world these days, but I'm still somewhat involved in the research as well. But I teach a course on resilience. And yeah, when we get to the later part of the lifespan and talking about resilience, we're talking about some of these psychological variables that can help make a huge difference. So I was talking about how we measure the perceptions of aging across these 5 different domains. So social versus cognitive versus physical, et cetera. We also measure gains and losses, so perceived gains and losses. So because we're acknowledging how complex and multifaceted subjective experiences of aging are, right? You may feel old in the work realm, but young in the family or the leisure. Maybe you're youngest person on the tennis court in the group that you play with or whatever. And so we recognize that there's gains and losses across all of these domains as well. And so people who report more gains, we're actually finding a buffering effect where that can offset the negative impact of stereotypes and self-perceptions of aging on health. So I think for me,
Wow.
that the buffering effect is really fascinating.
That is so interesting. I'm blown away talking to people like you about the midlife experience. And that's a theme that's come up, is that it's both growth and decline. And in some past episodes, we've discussed how it can be easy to focus on one side or the other. And I think it's easier to focus on maybe the negative component of it. So I would love to hear more about some of those things that you know from the research that we can do to be more resilient as it relates to our subjective experience of aging.
Yeah. So I think one of the things is just kind of understanding midlife as its own period of life that's full of stability and transition. There's the career or the family or the partnerships or the loss of partnerships and the stability transition. And so just acknowledging that transitions are hard. My 2-year-old struggles with transitions, and all the way up to transitioning into a long-term care facility throughout our life, like a transition, puberty, menopause, like transitions are never easy. And so I think giving ourselves a little bit of grace when we're in those times. And then also thinking about this period of development that a lot of people never really thought about before. It was kind of like, you develop until you're 18, you're an adult, and then you get old and you die, right? And so I think it really can take back this period of our lives. I'm almost 42, I'm right here with your listenership. And I think we can take back this period of our lives and kind of try to recreate what it is and find it as a time of opportunity and growth. When we're able to do that, that can act as a pretty strong protective factor. But coping skills actually tend to get better as we get older anyway. So that's one thing that we can practice and try and find better ways of doing it, right? Ditching the alcohol coping and finding the problem-based and the social support and the emotional support and the finding those things that work. The more practice we have, the better we can get at them if we allow ourselves to.
I think it's so interesting, your conceptualization of domains, because I would imagine there's some wisdom in, if you have a strength, really building on it, because it probably balances out some of those negative areas or helps you strengthen those negative areas. Do you see that at all?
I think so. I think that's really important. We did all the focus groups and interviews and diary studies when we were creating this awareness of age-related change scale to say, what are these items that really resonate with people? But people report feeling more themselves. They know themselves better. They feel like they have permission to be themselves more. And I think that's really important and can help, right? So it kind of this realization that I'm at a certain age, I can just be who I am now. And I don't know why I couldn't before, but now I can. And it's kind of a nice shift.
Yeah, that really resonates with me and some of my discussions. It's kind of going from like a socially constructed person, like you kind of have taken in the world, but now in midlife, you have that chance to determine your internal compass in terms of, what do I believe in? What do I value? How do I want to do things? Not necessarily how do I think somebody else wants me to live my life. And so that's really, I think, could be really valuable in this, in terms of like just that aging experience. Like, hey, it's okay. I'm not as worried about what society says. I have my own internal compass about the life I'm living.
I think you're spot on. And I think that's one of those things. So if you would ask somebody off the street what they think about aging, they're going to start with all the, the frailty and the declines and thinking a lot more in the physical realm. But I think if we can get people to really realize that people do report a lot of benefits to aging. And if we can start to conceptualize them, that's where the subjective experiences of gains really come in. And the more we notice those, the more protective they seem to be. So that's one. People also tend to report, and we find from the research that emotional well-being tends to get better, even in the face of really severe losses, the loss of a lifetime spouse and the loss of some major physical functioning. People report being happier, and that is an ongoing finding in the research that this field is grappling with. And coming to find out that it's real. It's not just this strange finding, but it keeps being replicated. And of course, there's individual difference, individual variability across everything. That's what makes us as humans, right? But in general, there's a lot of benefits that people are bringing. And the funny thing about studying aging is you haven't been there yet, right? takes a lot of talking to people and listening and understanding
Yeah.
many different types of experiences.
I love hearing that because I really do think like that's not the narrative. The narrative is, oh, it's decline. You're getting grays. You have this midlife crisis, but it's not that. It does not have to be that. Like you said, midlife is challenging and there are lots of different individual experiences, but we've grown in experience. We've grown in skills. We've grown in our emotional well-being, hopefully, and we can be more intentional about what we know brings us joy and meaning. So I just really love hearing that.
Yeah.
Are there more practical steps that you could tell us about how to cultivate a positive subjective aging experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most important things is checking our biases. So, a lot of these are implicit and we don't even notice. I love what I'm still uncovering kind of messages about older people that I haven't thought of yet. And so, just little things, right? Like older people are supposed to be less physically active. There's the recliner chair or the rocking chair, or not, you're supposed to be set in your ways, or you're supposed to not want to try new foods, or supposed to be resistant. And certainly, again, that individual variability thing. But I think if you can check that assumption and say, well, maybe some older people are that way, that are people that I knew, but maybe I don't want to be that way. I hope I'm still trying new foods and giving new music a chance and not writing it off when I'm like 92. I hope that I can keep this message of openness as I navigate my life and check those biases and not let them determine who I'm going to be. So I think that's one thing. I think one of the most important things you can do if you're out there and you've heard somebody recently talk about a senior moment, like squash that. Let's get rid of this. I've been forgetting my keys since I was like 18. I don't know. It wasn't due to age then. It's probably not now.
That's right. I heard somebody else say, like we have difficult times across our lifespan, but when it's a midlife, we almost are socialized. We're like, oh, it's a midlife crisis. And I think that's a big part of what I'm learning from this podcast is to really question the things that I'm hearing about myself and my generation, and decide what I want to be, how I want this to be, and not accept like that's how it has to be, even though I haven't been there. Well, I get to forge my own path, right?
I think so. And I think it's worth questioning. And maybe there's something that happened that it is due to age, but I think a lot of times it's not going to be. And there is good research that shows that in kind of an age attribution bias happens. You could be like, oh, well, I, went for a hike and my right knee is just in excruciating pain. It's just because I'm getting old. Well, your left knee is the same age. It's maybe not just because of age. There's maybe something wrong. And making these age attributions can actually get people to delay treatment or skip it altogether. And then it can get worse, right?
Yeah, exactly. One thing I wanted to give you the chance to talk about are kind of the societal implications of subjective aging. You've mentioned some of that, but do you have more that you want to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think health on a pretty wide range. So we can't have this conversation and not talk about Becca Levy, who's one of the leading researchers in this field who has shown so many outcomes linked to negative attitudes towards aging and negative age beliefs. But one of the most cited ones that she found and reported was 7.5-year longevity difference. So people who report more positive views of aging may live 7.5 years longer on average. And that is a pretty significant chunk of time. So, I mean, of course, we want to make sure we have those years as it's healthy, but that's a pretty long chunk of time. But so I think societally, the reduction of negative age stereotypes and negative focus on experiences of personal aging. I mean, the research that's tied to health is like, I'll just name a few, right? So cardiac event, hospitalization, depressive symptoms, cognitive decline, even neuropathology associated with Alzheimer's disease. And this one's interesting, linked to health behaviors. So people who have more positive views on aging engage in more positive health behaviors, right? They go to the doctor, they wear their seatbelts, they may quit smoking, that kind of a thing. So it's kind of like taking an active part in feeling like you have some control over the aging process. So I think if we can kind of shift this on a societal level, I think maybe we can see better health across the board, which would be pretty huge.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, we can do it. I joke about this. I say it too often. My fault on this podcast is I kind of get overly optimistic, but I want to do what we can to change that narrative. You are speaking from a science-based perspective that subjective aging makes a difference, both at a societal level and an individual level. And we don't need to accept those stereotypes that we've had in the past. And earlier you mentioned that there are a lot of positive things to aging too. All ages of life are difficult, but here are some of the positive things about this as well. What would you say
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. So I think the improvement in relationship quality, social relationships, kind of get better social skills as we have more practice, a sense of knowing ourselves better and being able to be a bit more true to ourselves than when we were younger. Better emotional regulation, better coping skills, more engagement in health behaviors in general. People do tend to take better care of themselves as they get older.
That's right. And we are kind of that sandwich generation, so sometimes we're caregivers for our parents and or caregivers for our children, but our children are becoming more independent too. So I think sometimes we might have more independence at this age for developing those resilience behaviors and putting those in our routine.
Yes, right. So what you mentioned is definitely one of the known stressors of midlife is just that the competing roles and responsibilities, that there's more people need you than ever before. You may be at the peak of managing things at work and home and family and young ones and older family members and neighborhoods and councils and boards and all of it. And that can be a stressor for sure.
Mm-hmm. There's so much great knowledge about this topic, Allie. I know it's an emerging area and you've been writing about this a lot, but how would you advise us to use this knowledge to live healthier, more fulfilling lives?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. I mean, I think one of the things that we can do is find and be mentors with people of all ages. So I heard the advice one time that you should have friends, like actual friends who are older than you and younger than you, right? So that you can always be learning from somebody and always be teaching somebody what you've learned. In our society, we kind of tend to be age segregated. Maybe it's age segregated by choice, right? But I'm a fan of more integrated age communities so that we can learn from each other, rely on each other, teach each other what we know, share strengths, and, watch my kid for an hour. I can grab your groceries while I'm at the store. Those kinds of intertwined neighborhoods and communities that I think we've moved away from.
I love that. You're so right. That's the type of advice that once you hear it, you're like, yeah, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, and do it.
That's such a great recipe because we can learn from those who have been ahead of us, that we may be doing the things that we're going to be encountering. And yet it is a really satisfying time in midlife to be mentoring people because we have been through some things. And I know for me, it helps me realize that I have learned a few tricks, that I have some skills to share, and it's just really a fulfilling thing.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's important to be present and visible in those roles too. Our older neighbors should be mentoring us, and we should have, there's a lot. Social media is hard. It can go either way, right? There's some tendency to focus on the super agers and the bodybuilders and the people who probably the general public is not gonna that level of functioning. But I think we need more realistic examples and mentors of what it looks like to grow old in a way that it's just well and taking care of each other and taking care of ourselves and not limiting what we're doing based on what we expect aging to be.
Allie, this is a fascinating topic and a useful one as well. So I'm curious, as somebody who's really studied this, what are some of your final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with about subjective aging and midlife?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. I mean, one of the cool things about attitudes is that they're under our control. They're free to change, right? We don't have to pay any money. And it just takes a little effort. And I think starting to check our biases and expectations of aging earlier on, like I think in midlife, we're doing ourselves a real favor to prevent those extra decades from just having internalized stereotypes over time that really get under our skin and really have a stronger effect. So I think that checking our biases and really just kind of thinking about, is this aging? Is this how I want aging to be? And realizing that there's lots of different possibilities there is important. I think that, I've been talking about positive views on aging, and I always like to clarify here, I'm not saying that aging is easy and perfect and happy all the time. There are some serious challenges for some people more than others, but I don't think it's ever easy. And so I think what I'm advocating here for, which I really want to make clear, is that even people who have endured devastating things are able to also find positive aspects of their life and positive aspects of growing older and new opportunities. And it can maybe help offset some of the negative, but it's not denying, it's not replacing.
Right. That makes total sense. Yeah. Yeah, I know. I could go on and on here.
I know I
I'm,
could.
I'm sure you could too.
I can
But,
tell.
kind of along that vein, like what are some resources if people are wanting to find out more? What would you recommend if people want to kind of go more in depth on this?
Yeah, I've been laughing because you have been using this phrase, changing the narrative. And that's actually an organization out of Denver, just an hour down the road from me. And their entire purpose is to eradicate ageism. So changing the narrative, you're already there. You should
awesome.
Check them out. They have a fantastic website with lots of neat, great newsletter, lots of great resources and events that are remote you can tune into from anywhere. And they've done some really creative things. Like they've had a birthday card competition where local artists can submit positive aging message birthday cards and actually win a cash award, and then they sell them and everything. So
that is so cool. Yeah, that sounds like the perfect answer, as you might guess I would say after saying that over and over here.
Yeah,
I will definitely check that out. I might have to get a poster in my room or something after all the times I said that.
We have a really neat ageism infographic. Right?
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, lots of good resources there. I'll just put in a plug for our Center for Healthy Aging here at Colorado State University. There's some really great resources and tons of good research talks and things if you want to just find out more about aging in general, not necessarily attitudes towards aging, but like information and the science. There's so much good research going on in lots of different fields. Biomedical, actually veterinary, there's some comparative medicine type stuff, psychology, sociology, design, all kinds of fields. You can come to aging, business, all kinds of things. So some really neat talks there. Becca Levy, I mentioned, is a researcher who's published all of this great academic work, but she just came out with a book last year called Breaking the Age Code, where she's talking about this exact topic and has some nice strategies in there and some neat stories from throughout her career. And then there's a lot of academic work too. So if you're interested in searching for things in developmental science, human development, psychology, we have a new meta-analysis that just came out this year, updating. So I think I was talking earlier on about how this field is growing so fast. We did a meta-analysis in 2014, and there were, less than 20 studies that we were able to include. And now there's over 100 in this updated.
Oh my gosh.
10 years later. So we're not
really, wow. That really adds to what we know about it, the effectiveness, the confidence we can have in this kind of construct. And wow, that's incredible. Yeah. I'll make sure to get some links from you too after this show and put them in the description so listeners can find those even easier. So yeah, Allie, this is a really important topic to our listeners and to society in general. And so again, I just want to say thank you for all that you've done on this and for being willing to come on this kind of, out there podcast on Midlifers. It's just really, really appreciated. And I think it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you so much for what you're doing. And thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for giving it some space. I love talking about it. And I'm glad you find it as interesting as I do.
I'm so happy you made it to the end of this encouraging conversation, and I hope you will be kind to yourself this week and continue to find those incremental steps that will take you where you want to be in your journey. Thank you so much for listening today. It really gives me joy you made it this far into the episode. So until next time, keep exploring, stay curious, and stay true to yourself. Hey there, listeners. I just wanted to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude for listening to this podcast. Your support and feedback keep me motivated to continue growing and crafting episodes that are meaningful and helpful for you on your journey. That's why I'm inviting you to join our Gen X Mindscape community page on Facebook. It's a great space to share your feedback on the show, suggest future episode topics, or simply connect with fellow listeners. Also, don't hesitate to leave me a voice message over at genxmindscape.com by clicking on Leave a Voice Message at the top of the page. Whether you choose to remain anonymous or provide your name and email, it's entirely up to you. Once again, thanks so much for listening. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing from you.